Ever stood under a sky so wide your secrets felt small? Here on the heart of a cowboy we ride the stories of the West campfire truths, trail dust memories, saloon whispers. Gritty human, sometimes messy. Every tale is a horizon to chase. Subscribe, pull up a stool, and maybe find a little courage for your own frontier. Rain fell in a fine dusty curtain under the Sable Mesa trestle. 3 men stood with their hats pulled low and their coats slick with mud. An older man knelt in the wash where storm water ran thin over red clay. His hands were tied behind him. His face was cut and swollen. He watched the tallest of the 3 without blinking. Sheriff Ransom Pike stepped closer, boots sucking at the ground. He set the cold mouth of a Colt to the man's temple. His voice was a worn piece of velvet. "Tell me where she is." The man lifted his chin, rain ticking off his jaw. No fear in him, only a scraped kind of calm. "You already lost her," he said. Pike's smile did not touch his eyes. "Then you are finished." He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked the culvert. A silver shell casing spun in the mud, the letter R nicked into its base. The rain buried it slowly until it was just another glitter under the water. The auction yard at Dead Horse Gulch smelled like wet iron and sick cattle. Lantern light trembled in the rafters of McKendree Stockyard and made the steam look alive. Men gathered tight to the platform. Some chewed, some spat. All of them watched the rope. The girl they pulled up had dirt on her cheek and a torn sleeve. Dark hair clung to her face. Her wrists were tied raw with hemp. On the left one a small crescent scar flashed pale, the kind of mark a child carries when she grows. The auctioneer grinned wide. 22, he said. Strong hands. $3 to start. He walked her in a circle as if showing a mule. She kept her gaze on the boards. She did not wobble. "No husband," someone called. "None worth mentioning," the auctioneer said. "Who says 3? From the shadows by a post, Cole Whitaker's voice came quiet. 30. Heads turned. He had a coat too big for him and a brim that hid his brow. His boots were clean from the ankles up and muddy from there down. Lines ran from his eyes as if the ground had cut them there. In his pocket, a nickel watch ticked under cracked glass. The hand stopped at 2:17. 30, the auctioneer echoed. "You sure of that, mister?" "I am." Money changed hands. The rope came free with a knife. Cole held out a canteen. The girl watched him rather than the blade. He made his movements small. Her lips were split. She drank. A wisp of cottonwood fluff drifted in from the yard and caught in her hair. "Name," Cole said. The auctioneer answered like he was proud to know. "Lila Hart." Cole took her by the elbow. Gentle, not claiming. He led her past the glances and the men who rolled their shoulders as if to shrug off the price. They rode under a low moon, 2 horses, one bigger, one small and sharp-footed. The country was open and smelled like red rock after rain. Lightning flickered far off. The wind carried dust the way a river carries silt. Cole did not talk. He listened to the night like a man who had learned the dark has a voice. When thunder came, he stiffened so hard his saddle creaked. His breath changed. His hand went to his ear, then to the reins again. Lila saw it. She held her mare a little closer without touching him. The second roll of thunder died over the ridge, and he swallowed, let the horse walk. After a time, he found his voice. "No one wears ropes at my place," he said. They reached his homestead near Arroyo Santo in the black stretch before dawn. A simple cabin sat under a cottonwood that was older than any fence. 2 windows. A porch with a missing slat. The barn leaned a little to the left. He helped her down. When she winced, he looked away rather than make it worse. Inside smelled of dry wood and lye soap. A stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a nail with a coat hanging on it. On the wall, a small portrait where a woman with kind eyes held a girl with curls. Someone had set dried wildflowers on the sill beneath it and left them there long enough for dust to thread their stems. "You can have the room," Cole said. "I will take the loft in the barn." He set a chipped basin on a stand and filled a pitcher from the barrel. He put a folded dress on the bed. Blue faded clean. He stood in the doorway a second too long, trying to find the words that would make it something other than what it looked like. He settled for this. "You are safe here." When he left, the room held its breath. Lila stood very still. Her wrists throbbed where the rope had cut. She rubbed the marks and watched the mirror cloud and clear as her breath touched it. The portrait watched her back. She ran 2 fingers over the edge of the quilt, then opened the dresser because the quiet felt like a dare. Beneath a layer of ribbon and a small silver-backed brush lay a wooden box carved with little flowers. The lid stuck. She pried it up with her nail. Inside, tied with a narrow strip of cloth, a letter in a hand, as neat as fence pickets. The date said April 1861. She read by the window. The words went slow and heavy. Cole. If you are reading this, then it happened like we feared. They are coming for those who tell the truth. I have trusted something to Martha for safekeeping. If I do not live to see it done, find my daughter. She bears a scar like a new moon on her wrist. Keep her from them. They will bury us all to hide what we know. Signed Patrick Hart. Lila's throat went tight. The paper felt like a leaf that might crumble. She refolded it along the original lines and laid it back where it had been. Her hands shook. She closed the box and slid it into the drawer again, tucked under the blue dress she was supposed to wear like she could put the words themselves back to sleep. The door clicked soft. Cole set down a plate. Beans, cornbread, a cup with coffee that smelled like mornings before bad news. He saw her face and did not ask what she had found. He had the look of a man who knew what letters can do. Eat, he said. She took the chair and watched him take the other. He kept space between them, the kind polite people keep when they are not sure if the other person will bolt. You paid for me, she said. He did not flinch. I will not keep you, he said. The paper says one thing, my house says another. That is what men like you say. I'm trying to say I will not let them sell you again. Her mouth tightened, then loosened. She ate with care like someone who had learned not to waste anything good, not even the way a spoon feels warm in the hand. After he went to the porch. The rain had thinned to a hush under the cottonwood. He stood with his hat hooked by one finger and listened to the frogs and the creek and the little sounds that mean a place is still alive. He touched the watch in his pocket thumb over the cracked glass. The hands lay stubborn at 2:17. He cleared his throat like a man talking to a grave. I found her, he said. By afternoon, the sky cleared enough to make dust lift. A rider came up the lane with 2 more behind him. The lead horse stepped light as if it knew someone watched. Sheriff Ransom Pike swung down and tied his reins in a deliberate knot. He had a scar that bracketed his mouth into a permanent half-smile. His badge shone where it pinned his vest. Sullivan Place looked smaller than I remember, he said to no one eyes on the porch. Whitaker Place, Cole said from the steps. Pike's smile held. That is right. Time changes a lot of things. He looked past Cole into the house without moving his head. Gentlewomen at home today. Cole did not give him the satisfaction of turning. He held the door frame lightly, a hand that did not shake. You heard of any runaway trouble? Pike asked. Word is a certain girl with a green look in her eye and a tidy little scar. Valuable property gone missing from a place outside the law. Folks get riled when their investments walk off. Cole kept his voice even. War ended 4 years ago. Paper says so, Pike said, and plucked a shell casing from his pocket like a coin trick. Nickel bright. The letter R at the base caught the light. He set it on the fence post with 2 fingers. A reminder, for both of us. Some things are not over because a paper says they are. What do you want here? Only to see if the wind brought anything interesting to your door. He looked at Cole in a way that meant he already knew the answer he wanted. And to say, if an item of sensitive nature came into your keeping a ledger, perhaps the right men might be inclined to show mercy. Cole did not answer. A cottonwood seed drifted between them and stuck to the casing where a drop of rain held it. Pike turned. His boots scuffed the step like a signature. He touched his hat brim at the door as if he had just made a good deal and did not need the words for it. Your hospitality, he said, always something to see. He took 3 steps toward his horse and then paused. His gaze slid back to the window. Lila stood in the shadow of the curtain, only one eye visible, the color clear even in that dim. Pike's head tipped as if he had found a coin in road dust. There she is, he said, and smiled without warmth. We will meet proper, miss. Very soon. Pike and his men rode back down the lane as if they had forgotten something and would return for it when the sun was better. The shell casing he had left on the fence post gleamed where a cottonwood seed clung to a bead of rain. Cole watched the dust settle and said nothing. Lila stood in the doorway until the horses were only sound. She shut the door with care, as if the wood might splinter if she asked it to do too much. Morning came clean and bright after the storm. The red in the dirt looked new. Cole set 3 green bottles on a flat ledge of sandstone behind the barn. He checked the chambers on a long-barreled Colt and held it so Lila could see how the light slid along the metal. "It kicks," he said. "Keep your wrists straight. Do not fight the gun. Let it speak, and then you answer with the next breath." Her fingers were still raw where the rope had chewed them. She took the weight of the revolver and felt it in her forearms and shoulders. The first shot broke her stance and went high into scrub. Smoke laid a blue ribbon in the still air. The second went wide to the left. He stepped to her side, not touching her, adjusted her foot by pointing at the dust. "Your heel here," he said. "Elbow loose. You will want to hold on too hard. Do not." The third bottle jumped and fell clean. She did not smile. She breathed out the way he told her and went again. By the time the sun cleared the cottonwood crown, 2 bottles lay in shards, and the last had 3 pale rings on its side where she had grazed it. Her arms shook, and there was gun oil on her fingers. She looked at her hands like they belonged to someone she might learn to know. They worked the chores with a quiet that did not hide as much as it hoped. She scattered feed for the hens and listened to the soft talk of their beaks on the ground. He mended a gate and tested each slat with his palm. On the table, a thin book sat open to a page about a man who lived by a pond. Lila traced the words without reading them. The house held the low sound of a place trying to remember how to be ordinary. In the blue hour before dawn, the next day, a cry woke her. Not a word, just the sound a body makes when it is not in the present. She went to the porch. Cole was on his knees in the yard, his hands pressed over his ears as if the sky itself had opened. He stared through her at something far away. His lips moved. Artillery. Down. Get down. Lila did not touch him. She stepped where his gaze would find her. "It is 1869, she said. "You are at Arroyo Santo. There is no smoke here but the one we build." He blinked. The air returned to his chest in a rough breath. His hands came down and he looked ashamed for a heartbeat, and then only tired. "I am a light sleeper," he said as if to make a joke, so the moment would not have to stand alone between them. Later she found him in the shadow of the cottonwood, sitting with his back to the trunk and the watch open in his palm. The glass was cracked into a spider lattice, and the hands still refused to move. She stood with her shoulder to the bark and let the cotton drift settle in her hair. "Why did you say yes to the 30?" she asked. "You could have walked away." He shut the watch and turned it over in his fingers. "I owed someone," he said. "Who?" "A man I wronged. He told it by fire that night." The flames made a low lick, and the iron grate ticked as it warmed. He spoke without looking at her, watching the coals. "In the spring of '63, a Confederate officer came up our road and leaned against this same post like he owned the ground. He asked about Union men in the county, said he was tired of seeing boys die and only wanted the names of men who could make the killings stop. I believed him, or I wanted to. I said Patrick Hart had friends that wrote letters north." Lila sat very still. The only sound in the room was the crumbling of a coal to ash. "It was Pike," she said. "I did not know him then," Cole said. "Not the way we know him now." Her hands closed on her knees until the knuckles blanched. "You told him my father. You put fire to our door." "I did," Cole said. He did not raise his voice to defend himself because the truth did not need a louder tone to be true. "I went looking for your family when I learned what came after. I was late for the living and early for the dead. Patrick was not yet gone. He asked me to find you. I've been trying to keep that promise since." She stood. The room turned a degree colder, though the fire still burned. She walked to the small bedroom and closed the door with care. The portrait watched the hall. Cole sat alone until the fire sank to red and then to a soft, dark glow. She did not sleep. The letter in the dresser put its weight in her chest. Near dawn, she lit the lamp and opened May Whitaker's journal. The pages breathed of lie and old roses. Halfway through a line waited that she had missed in her first reading. Under the big cottonwood where Anne asked, I hid what Patrick left. No one will think to look inside a living thing. Lila took the lantern to the cottonwood. The bark was furrowed like the skin on an old hand. She ran her fingers along a seam where the growth was not right. A panel the size of a small book shifted under her touch. She pried it up. The hollow beyond smelled of oil and sap. A tin box lay inside wrapped in oiled cloth. The cloth left a slick trace on her palms as she eased it open. Inside, folded pages and a small ledger with entries written in a firm, steady hand. Names, dates, sums, notes in the margins in a different ink. Some of the names she knew from talk in town. A rancher who now paid for the church windows. A freight boss who prayed out loud in public. One name had a line drawn beneath it more than once. Silas Breckenridge. Cole's shadow laid beside hers on the trunk. He had come without a sound. His eyes went to the name and did not move away. "Put it back," he said softly. "We cannot let the tree keep it, but the world will try to take it if it knows we have it." They wrapped the ledger and slid the panel tight again. Sap dampened the edge of Lila's fingers and glued a bit of cotton drift to her skin. They walked back to the house in a night that was beginning to lose its stars. They did not make the porch before the rifle cracked. The sound came from the ridge above the arroyo and ripped a splinter from the doorpost where Cole's shoulder had been. He rounded on Lila and moved her behind the water barrel. The second shot struck the barrel high and spat a wet arc. He peered along the edge and counted without speaking. The third shot came lower testing. "Creek," he said. "Now." They ran, bent low the wet from the barrel smearing down Lila's sleeve. The arroyo bed held a thin run of water that whispered between stones. Cole slid down the bank and took a small mirror from his pocket. He knelt with his back to the curve of clay and angled the glass to catch the morning light. Flash, flash, flash. He tucked the mirror away as if he had been holding a coin and did not wish to be robbed. They moved along the water where the bank rose high enough to give cover. Bullets hit dirt and made that sudden dry cough of impact. Lila tasted grit and the iron of her own breath. She held the ledger under her arm and kept her head down. Her mare turned loose at the shot, crashed through tamarisk, and then stilled somewhere out of sight. Voices rose on the ridge. They were careful voices, not drunk voices, the kind that get paid for patience. Cole stopped behind a tumbled wedge of sandstone and drew the Colt. He listened. A sound answered that did not belong to the men above. A small, shrill note 3 times from farther down the arroyo. A whippoorwill would not call at that hour. Cole looked at Lila and nodded once. "We go to it," he said. They found the men in the shade of a thicket of juniper faces and hats wrapped the way a desert man wraps to keep dust out of his teeth. The tall one stepped forward with his hands where they could be seen. His hair was silver at the temples. His eyes held a kind of patience that belongs to people who have had to wait for longer than is fair. "Elias Carter," he said. "Old friends send their names the way some men send bread." Cole eased the hammer down and holstered the gun. He put his palm out, and Elias took it without hurry. Behind Elias, 4 more figures watched the ridge where the shooters would be. They moved as if they had done this before and had no wish to do it again unless they must. "We need your creek," Elias said. "It will hide our crossing." They pushed into the trees beyond the bend and came out into a glen where someone had made camp in a way that left almost no mark. Bedrolls rolled tight, a fire pit with only the ghost of ash. On a canvas spread a map lay anchored with stones. Strings ran from one town name to another. Lila saw Dry Creek Station marked in pencil. She saw other lines drawn to places she did not know. Elias lifted the corner of the map and slid a cloth packet from beneath it. He opened it and looked at the ledger she handed him. His mouth thinned at one of the names. He did not say it aloud. He wrapped the book again and set it against his chest, like it might warm him. "You brought the storm to your door," he said to Cole without reproach. "You had to once you took her in." They heard voices on the ridge again, and the bite of a spur on rock. One of Elias's people whistled twice a low warning. He pointed toward the dark of the trees. Elias nodded. "We have time for only one decision," he said. He put a hand on the map where the penciled circle lay around Dry Creek Station. "There is a wire there and a man in Houston who still listens when truth knocks. If he hears this, he will move his people. If he does not, the county will swallow the ledger whole. The judge will keep smiling in public and the badge on Pike will shine until Russ takes it." Cole looked at Lila. Her eyes were clear. She tightened the strip of cloth that held her hair back and felt the weight of the book where Elias had set it against her. She thought of a shell casing shining on a fence post and a cotton seed glued to it by rain. She thought of the way a revolver kicks and how a breath can steady a hand if someone shows you how. Elias stepped back from the map. He folded the canvas in one smooth motion. The glen seemed to get smaller and then larger again, as if the trees themselves had taken a breath. 48 hours, he said. The wind that had drifted the cotton now carried the faintest smell of smoke from somewhere far off. The sound of the creek went on without bothering itself about plans or badges, or who did what to whom. Lila could feel the river stones under her boots. She could feel the ledger through the cloth. She nodded once, and Cole nodded after, not in agreement with Elias, but in agreement with her. They broke camp before the sun showed its face. Juniper breathed cool on the back of Lila's neck as Nora tied a plain shawl under her chin and smudged a little ash at the edge of her cheekbone. "Keep your head down when men look too long," Nora said. "Let them see a tired woman, and they will look for trouble elsewhere." Cole saddled the rangy bay and checked its cinch twice. He touched the pocket where the mirror lived, and then buttoned his coat. He studied Lila as if making a list he could not write down. 2 miles ahead, he said. "If the road is open, I will wait by the lightning-struck cottonwood over Broken Branch." He did not add what he would do if it was not. He swung up and moved out along the tree line, the horse stepping as if it had learned silence from its rider. Elias watched him go with that patient look of his, and then pressed a folded scrap into Lila's palm. She did not open it. She slipped it into the seam of her dress, where the ledger sat warm against her ribs. Juniper shade and birdsong hid their departure as she and Nora led the horses through the last veil of trees and out to the low road that wound toward Dry Creek Station. The morning rose hot and clear. A freight wagon rattled past with a man and a boy asleep on sacks of flour. A cloud of black soot drifted all the way from the rails where a locomotive hammered toward the pass. Ash carried a metallic taste that felt like pennies on the tongue. Lila rode with her shoulders loose and her eyes lowered and counted fence posts. Nora kept her right hand near the horn and her left on the mare's neck, a calming weight. They reached the flats where the road narrowed to a plank bridge over a gash of rock. The lightning-struck cottonwood stood at the far end, split down the middle, and charred where the bolt had gone. Cole was not there. The place where he would have waited held only shadow. Nora slowed. He would have come back, she said quietly, unless he could not. Lila felt her spine steady. "We keep riding." 3 men waited at the mouth of the bridge. Their horses blocked the planks without seeming to. The one in the center sat straight and easy, his coat square over his shoulders, and his boots polished. Sheriff Pike's badge caught light. To his left, Asa Boone's right shoulder was strapped tight under his vest, the cloth wrinkling where the bandage bit. To his right, Eli Boone chewed and spit tobacco juice through the space where 2 teeth were missing. "Morning, ladies," Pike said. His smile was Sunday, and his eyes were not. Nora pulled her mare a little in front, the picture of a sister who liked to answer for the quieter one. "Mornin', Sheriff. Dry year for corn. Where do you travel?" "Dry Creek," Nora said. "My sister's boy is sick to the lungs. We heard the station carries a tonic." Pike watched Lila without looking like he was watching. "Your wagon." "We are riding," Nora said. "It is quicker on a small errand." "You see any riders?" he asked. "Old or gray in the hair. A man who keeps to the brush more than the road." Lila let a crease of worry touch her forehead. "We saw a wagon with a broken wheel. The man was cursing the Lord in a soft voice. No gray hair, Sheriff." Pike took that in. His gaze touched the cut on Nora's shawl and moved away. He turned to Asa and Eli and made a small nod. Eli moved his horse, then Asa. The lane opened like a hand unclenching. "You take care," Pike said. "There are men about who make a habit of lying. You do not want to catch their habit." They crossed the bridge at a walking pace. Lila listened hard to the hoofbeats behind them. When the road bent and the men dropped from sight, she gave Nora a look and felt the breath she had been holding leave her. They did not speak again until the station came into view. Dry Creek Station sat where the road and the rails shook hands. A short platform, a depot house with a tin roof, a line of telegraph wire humming a tune no one could hum back. The office window framed a man with spectacles and a part in his hair so straight it might have been drawn on. He looked up when the bell over the door made its small, bright sound. "Ma'am," he said, "the gentlefolk here pronounce it Dry Creek even when there is no creek." She set a coin on the counter without fuss and slid the folded message across. Please send this to Colonel James Harper in Houston. This token goes with it." She set Elias's small metal badge beside the paper. It had a worn edge where a thumb had rubbed it to worry. The operator glanced at the name and then at the token. He nodded and began to key the message. The sound of the instrument tapped a nervous heartbeat into the room. Lila watched his fingers and counted the beats without meaning to. The air smelled of lamp fuel and dust and old glue. "Do you wish to wait for a reply?" he asked. She did not answer. Hooves clattered outside. A voice she knew called for water, and a different voice told it to wait and listen. The operator's hands faltered for only a blink before he kept them moving. "Back door," she said. "Where?" He pointed with his chin toward a curtain. Nora held the horses in the alley with the reins twisted in one hand. Lila stepped into glare and heat and took the bay's lead. Sheriff Pike's shadow crossed the front windows and paused exactly where the light made a square on the floorboards. "Ride," Nora said. They moved at a trot that did not draw attention, and then at a canter that did. A shout went up behind them. Eli's horse hammered the road with a sound that came fast. Pike's command carried clear. "Do not shoot in town. Outside then." They were outside the town, inside 5 heartbeats. Field and scrub opened and wind hit their faces. Lila's mare stretched clean and sure. The first shot came once they were through the last yard and past the final picket fence. It ripped Nora's shoulder and spun her a quarter turn in the saddle. She caught herself and grabbed the horn and stayed on. Blood ran down her sleeve and collected at her cuff. "Keep low," Nora said through her teeth. "Find the rocks." To the right beyond a patch of cholla and sage, a spill of boulders rose like a beached ship. Lila guided toward it and felt the mare gather its legs and pick a path. They slid down the far side into shade and quiet. The world narrowed to their breath and the tick of hot metal cooling. "Let me see," Lila said. Nora shook her head and handed over a small pistol she had pulled from her boot. 2 shots, she said. "Wait until you hear them look the wrong way." "I am not leaving you." "You will," Nora said, and laid her good hand over the back of Lila's. "I have sent 3 children on alone. I know how it feels to do a hard right thing. Go." Boots scuffed stone above them. Eli's voice drifted lazy as if they were boys looking for a rabbit. Asa's sounded careful and quick to anger. Pike did not speak. His silence sat in the air like weather that was about to turn. Nora drew in a breath and then another. "Over here," she called as clear as a bell. "Over here if you have the courage to finish what you started at night." Eli laughed. Asa cursed when his boots slid. All 3 turned toward her voice. Lila slid along the base of the rock spine, holding her breath so the air would not betray her. She felt the ledger knock lightly against her ribs and moved her arm to still it. The first of Nora's 2 shots cracked and echoed. A man shouted and fell hard enough to make gravel jump. The second shot went a heartbeat later and made no one fall, but made 2 men duck and swear. Lila was at the edge now, in the cool of a slot that led to the boulder field's other side. She looked back once. Nora sat with her back to the stone face white mouth set the way a seamstress sets her mouth when a stitch must be taken just so. Lila slipped into the slot and came out in a tumble of sunlight and scrub. The mare had followed without a sound and stood with reins dragging and ears forward. Lila swung up, tucked her chin to the horse's neck, and put her heels to its sides. The bay slid between 2 mesquite and found ground as soft as a folded blanket. A voice cut the air ahead of her. Not Pike, not the Boones. A voice worn down at the edges by days that asked for more than they gave. "Lila," it said. A shadow stepped from behind a leaning boulder and blocked the cut where the horse needed to pass. The sun laid a knife edge along the rim of his hat and lit the bruise swelling under one eye. He lifted a hand not to grab the rein, but to show it was empty. The mare danced and snorted and gravel slid under her hooves. Cole's hat brim lifted just enough for her to see both eyes. He looked at the cut on her sleeve and the blood that had dried there. "Did you get it sent?" he said. "I did," she said. "I do not know if it reached him." "Good enough for now." A shout rolled along the rocks behind them. Eli called to Asa. Metal struck stone. Cole took the bay's rein and led horse and rider into a thin seam of brush that hid a game trail. Yucca spears scraped Lila's boot. The trail dropped into a fold of ground that kept their backs low. Twice Cole stopped and listened, and once he raised the small mirror and sent 3 quick flashes into the pale sky. No answer came. He slid the mirror away, like a secret he could keep, even if it did not help. The line shack lay where the foothills gave up trying to be mountains. A single room stood under a roof that sagged like a tired mule. The door hung true, which was the best thing about it. Cole got them inside and put the bay in the lean-to with a twist of rope through the ring. He checked the windows and the seams at the floor. He found a tin of shot on a shelf and shook 2 rounds into his palm. He loaded slow and clean. Lila set the ledger under her shirt at the spine and tied a kerchief tight. She took the small derringer from her pocket and checked its chambers. 2 shots waited like 2 words she would only say if there was no other way to speak. The first rider eased into view without showing his full shape, a hat, then a shoulder, then the shadow of a gun barrel against the shack's wall. Cole held up 2 fingers, 2 outside for sure. Then the third rider clinked a spur and muttered, and the count went up. Lila put her cheek to the edge of the window and saw the cut on Asa Boone's sleeve, where the shoulder brace pulled the cloth. Eli drank from a flask and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Sheriff Pike sat still as a stone with the reins looped on a finger. He did not need to say much to make men move. "You in there," Pike said. His voice carried through old boards the way smoke finds every crack. "Come out now and we can talk like neighbors." Cole did not answer. He set his palm on the back of Lila's hand and lifted it until the muzzle of the derringer rested at the height of his shoulder. He pointed at the brace under Asa's vest, and then at the torch Asa had taken from Eli. Asa shifted it to his right hand and his mouth tightened. He switched the torch to his left because the right would not hold. When he changes again, Cole whispered, "Take the flame." Pike made a small gesture with 2 fingers. His men moved wide and took the corners of the clearing. Dirt tapped the sill where a probe shot smacked and fell. Another hit lower. The third made a knot jump in the wood waist high. Cole counted under his breath and showed 3 with his fingers and then closed his hand. He rose clean and fast, fired twice at the shape that thought it could creep to the door, and dropped back. Someone outside swore and dragged a boot. Asa stepped in with the torch high to throw light through the window. His right shoulder flinched and he shifted the stick without thinking. Lila did not hold her breath. She pressed the trigger. The derringer spat a small, bright flame, and the torch spun and hit the dirt. Eli lunged to grab it, stumbled on a root, and his hat went with him. He kicked the burning brand out of reach by accident and cursed like a man who had just made a fool of himself in front of his sheriff. A laugh went through Lila's chest before she could stop it. Cole gave her the side of his mouth. "Good," he said. He lifted the Colt and took a low angle. The next shot outside came from farther back. Pike was keeping his better men from getting riled and letting impatience do work for him. They held that way until Noon leaned a shoulder on the roof. Heat pooled in the shack. The air turned to wool. Sweat ran cold down Lila's side where the ledger rested. The smell of horse and old timber and iron mixed with the metallic taste that comes before lightning. A rider came at a crouch with a fresh torch. He lit the edge from a brimstone match and raised it. Lila aimed at the flame again. The derringer spoke its last round and blew the torch apart into a smear of ember that died in a hiss on hard ground. Pike's voice went a notch lower. "Enough. Burn them." Asa did not argue. He passed the fire up to a man at the back who climbed the lean-to and then the main roof. The match scratched. The torch kissed dry shingle. Fire caught and ran like a fox. Smoke pushed down through every seam. Lila's eyes took the burn and filled. Cole's breath turned to cough. He pulled his bandana up and wet it and tied it over his face. He handed her the corner, and she did the same. The room went a shade darker that belonged to Smoke, and not tonight. Cole pointed at the door. "We leave through heat," he said. "We do not stop." Something else rose under the shout of the fire. Hooves. Not 3 or 4, but many. The sound came from the east with an order in it. Not a chase run. A line. A bugle called 2 notes. A voice that did not belong to Pike set its sound on the clearing. "United States Marshals," the voice said. "Put your weapons down. This is federal business." The fire hissed and roared. Pike did not drop his coat of authority. He barked to his men to finish the roof. The man on the ridge of the shack tossed the torch and slid down the other side. He hit the ground running. A marshal's carbine cracked and spit dust at his boots. The air filled with calls. Some men obeyed, some did not. It sounded like a fence being torn up and a barn door slamming and a church bell all at once in a world that was trying to tell you which kind of day it was. Cole took Lila's arm and pulled her to the door. Heat wrapped them. Smoke pushed them low. They ran into light. The yard was a hive. Men moved. Horses reared. A marshal with a square jaw and a coat that looked used pointed and shouted to take the far flank. A glint of badge winked on his chest. Cole cut hard for the stand of trees where shade could take them out of the open. Pike stepped into the gap like he had been waiting there since morning. He looked unmarked by smoke, untouched by ash. His pistol aimed level at Lila's heart. A silver casing lay glinting by his boot, half buried in trampled dust. The letter R in its base took a little ray of sun and held it. "You should have died with him," Pike said to Lila. "It would have spared the county this trouble." Cole moved between the barrel and the girl without thinking. Pike's mouth curled. "That will do." A gun spoke from the line of piñon beyond the yard. One shot. It sounded like a nail driven true. Pike's breath left him in one hard sound. He looked puzzled and angry at the same time, as if someone had broken a rule he wrote. He pressed a hand to his chest and found it came away dark. His knees forgot him. He sat in the dirt and then lay down in it. The silver casing near his boot turned on itself once and stilled. Nora Bell stood with one shoulder to a tree and both feet braced. Her face was the color of paper. Blood had dried in a flower on her sleeve. The little smoke from her pistol curled and then was gone. "For Patrick," she said. The yard changed shape. Asa Boone dropped his gun and put both hands up. Eli looked at his palm as if he had never seen a hand before, then let the flask fall and lifted his fingers high. Marshals in dust and badge and hard eyes came into the ring and took men by the wrist and put iron on them. Two put a blanket on the low roof and dragged it until the edge fell and the fire lost a corner to bite. Another beat the flames with a wet coat and swore at the smoke kindly, the way you swear at a mule you love. Lila felt the ledger against her spine like a plate of iron. She put her hand there and felt the paper through the cloth and then the steady pull of breath that had gotten tight without her noticing. Cole's cough tore him and then passed. He looked at Pike without gloating. He looked the way a man looks who has been waiting on a weight to fall for a long time and now finds that the ground is quiet in a strange new way. A marshal with a broad hat and a weathered face walked through the yard with that measured calm of someone used to bad hours. His eyes took in Nora and Asa and Eli, and the shape at Lila's boots and the shack still smoking. He tipped his hat a fraction at Lila, as if he knew her from a name on a page. He bent and picked up the silver casing near Pike's heel and turned it in his fingers. "That belongs to no one anymore," he said. He set it on the porch rail where the sun found it. A drift of cottonwood seed floated down and stuck to the small ring of rainwater that had gathered inside the cap. The seed quivered, then held. The badge on the marshal's coat caught the same light. He lifted his hand toward the ledger under Lila's shirt without touching her and waited for her eyes. "We will need to talk," he said. His voice had weight and room in it. Lila nodded once. She could taste ash and the faint sweetness of cotton on the air. The shack settled and gave up a last sigh of smoke through a hole where a knot had burned through. The bay stamped and shook its mane. Somewhere beyond the noise, a creek went on whispering to stones that did not carry any story but their own. The yard settled by inches. Men lowered their voices without being told. Smoke lifted in thin ropes from the roof and broke apart in the light. The shack still breathed heat. A black streak marked the ridge where fire had run. The marshal with the weathered face stepped to Lila and Cole. He tipped his hat in a way that carried respect without flourish. "Colonel James Harper," he said. "Houston Circuit." Cole gave a short nod. Lila felt the ledger under her shirt like a heartbeat. She drew it out and placed it in Harper's hands. The oilcloth left a dark print on her palm. Harper opened to the first page and let his eyes move. He turned a leaf with one finger. Names stood there in a steady hand. Dates, figures, notations that cut like blades. When he reached a line that had been underlined twice, he paused. Silas Breckenridge. His mouth did not change. Only his breath did. "We will keep this safe," he said. He lifted his gaze to Nora. Two marshals had wrapped her shoulder in clean cloth and propped her against the shade. She was gray around the mouth, but awake. "Get her water," Harper said. "Then send for the doctor at Dry Creek. I will take her statement after he looks at that wound." "Yes, sir." Eli Boone stood with his hands behind his back and his chin low. The swagger had gone out of him like air from a bellows. Asa's right arm hung stiff in its brace, and he flinched when a deputy set the iron. Pike lay where he had fallen. A canvas had found him. The silver casing on the rail caught sun and held it without heat. Elias Carter came into the clearing with two of his people at his back. He had dirt on his coat and a scratch across one cheek, a small bright thing on a calm face. He and Harper took each other's measure like men who have known bad ground together and do not need to say so. "You heard the wire," Elias said. "I did," Harper said. "I moved as fast as the horses let me." Elias's eyes went to Lila, then to the oil print the ledger had left on her palm. He nodded once in a way that felt like a hand on a shoulder. Nora pushed herself upright. Lila crossed to her and knelt to take her good hand. "You stayed long," Lila said. "I could not find reason to leave," Nora said. Her voice had a dry music. "You ran like a woman who means it. That is enough for me." Lila's throat closed and opened again. She helped Nora drink. The water left a clean shine on the tin cup. The smell of it cut through the ash and horse and wood. Harper walked the yard without hurry. He looked at the ruined roof and the line of tracks and dust. He spoke to a deputy in a tone that did not rise. Wagons were called. Men were counted. The shack gave a small sigh as a charred beam settled a fraction. Cole stood with his hands open at his sides, empty. The wind lifted his coat and set it back. The mark of smoke on his cheek made a new line that fit among the old ones. He reached into his pocket and brought out the nickel watch with its cracked face. He thumbed the crown and listened without hope or complaint. "Let me," Lila said. He placed the watch in her palm, a gentle relinquishing. Glass caught a sliver of sun. She turned the crown once, twice, 3 times. Something inside the case clicked like a small decision. The minute hand twitched and then crept. A tiny tick spoke from behind the broken glass, not loud but steady. Cole's eyes flicked to hers, then to the watch, then back. He did not smile wide. He breathed. "I have a room with a door that will close," Lila said, "and a table that stands even on a bad floor." He heard what she meant inside the words. He touched his hat brim and let the front of it lift off his brow. The cottonwood at the edge of the yard loosed a drift of white that hung in the heat and then settled on the rail where the casing sat. One seed held there in a small ring of water and made a tiny boat. Harper came back. He put the ledger in a leather bag that latched with a snap. He took down statements in a neat hand on a folded sheet. He asked questions with care. Where? Who? What time by the sky? He did not push when a voice went rough. He waited, and then asked the next thing. When he finished, he closed his book and looked at Lila with a level gaze. "You carry a name that men tried to erase," he said. "You carried it through." Lila felt the weight of that and set it down in a part of herself that could hold it. She glanced at Cole. He stood where he could see her and the path and the marshal both. A deputy lifted Pike's gun and held it to open air so all could see it was cleared. He set it aside. Another deputy placed a blanket over the canvas and tucked the corner. Asa and Eli were led toward the road where a wagon waited. They walked without the old bravado. The sound of chain links brushed the dirt like a soft rain that never falls hard. Elias pointed his chin toward the line of juniper. 3 figures stepped out, a woman and 2 men. All 3 wore the look of people who have lived in the cracks between towns. They held back rather than come forward. Elias raised a hand and they stopped, then faded again into shade. He nodded to Harper. "Old maps," he said. Harper nodded back. Then he looked to Cole. "You look like a man who walks 2 roads at once," Harper said. "Time to choose one." Cole watched the silver casing with the cotton seed, and then the small movement of the minute hand under cracked glass. He closed his fingers around the watch and set it back in his pocket. He looked at Lila as if checking a knot he had tied and found it held. Nora stood with help. She set a hand on Lila's cheek light as a moth. He would be proud, she said. She did not say which he. The light moved over the yard. The shadows shortened to stubs and then began to lengthen again. Men swung into saddles without noise. The bay bumped Lila's shoulder with its nose and breathed hay and dust on her wrist. Cole took the rein and offered it palm open. She took it and put her boot to the stirrup. The leather creaked in a pleasing way. Harper lifted his hand and the column eased forward. A deputy stayed back to stamp the last ember and make sure the roof did not catch again. The cotton seed on the rail trembled once and stayed. The silver casing sat quiet in its small ring of water. They moved out at a walk that made room for a hurt shoulder and a tired horse and a girl who had carried a book through gunfire. The creek spoke its quiet words to stone. A hawk rode a lazy circle over the field beyond. The cottonwood lifted and dropped its leaves in a sound like soft applause. Cole rode at Lila's side. He did not reach for her. He did not need to. The watch ticked in his pocket where she could hear it when the hoofbeats fell just right. The sound nestled into the rhythm of the road and held there. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.